I'm Dan Kelcher. I'm a solutions architect with IP Fabric, and today I'm going to talk about how IP Fabric can help with taking the trouble out of troubleshooting. So first, just kind of talk about why we're talking about troubleshooting. Why does this matter? What are the pain points? And then talk a little bit about what IP Fabric is, what it does, and then start going through a couple of troubleshooting scenarios and showing how IP Fabric can help get some data, get the information that you're looking for when you're trying to troubleshoot or resolve issues with a network. The first thing, when we talk about troubleshooting with networking, a lot of times you get it's a firewall problem or something weird is going on. The internet's slow, things like that. Or my personal favorite, the network is down. When those things happen, a lot of times you're going to get a ticket where maybe there's not a whole lot of information. People are kind of making guesses at where the problem could be. And as a network engineer, your job is to figure out number one, even if there is an issue, and then if there is, where is the issue? What do you need to do to fix it? The problem that you're going to run into, and probably have many times, I know I have over my career, is it's sounds a lot easier to do that than it actually is. Trying to find where these issues are, especially when you're dealing with large networks, complicated networks, global networks. You've got different devices, protocols, all these different things running. Figuring out that needle in a haystack can be a little bit difficult. So this is where IP Fabric can come in and help with a lot of things. Before we get into the specifics of how IP Fabric can do that, I want to talk a little bit about what IP Fabric is. If you're not familiar with the platform, hop into a quick demo here just to kind of show what the platform is. So right off the bat, this is our dashboard. It's a web-based application, runs in a VM, could be deployed on-prem if you want to deploy it in a cloud environment. That works too, but basically single OVA, pretty straightforward deployment. Really quick overview here. This is our dashboard. We've got a bunch of different intent checks. I just have this running against a virtual lab environment just to show off kind of the scenarios that I'm going to be going through a little bit later on. The big thing that we can do is number one, we're going to go through and basically discover a network, do a snapshot of the environment. So crawl the network, log into switches, routers, firewalls, load balancers, wireless controllers, uh, cloud platforms, all kinds of different kind of network devices to understand the environment. What's running, where are things, what's configured, how are things connected, what protocols are running. Really just taking all of that information from the network, all the stuff that the network knows. We're going to collect that, ingest it. We have a database that'll get built out with all of that information. And then we're going to build a model of the network. From that model, then we can start doing a lot of really cool things. So one of the things that we will be touching on is doing things like site diagrams. Really quick diagram. Again, this is a lab environment, so probably what not the most clean and pristine environment. Just really quickly, kind of thrown together just to illustrate what we can do here. But we can build out these diagrams. We can look at the various layers. This network only has routers, so I can't see layer 2 stuff. But I could go in and look at the different protocols that are running. I can zoom in on an individual device, get a ton of different information here. We can also go in and look at things like routing protocols, and we can look at all of the information that the network knows. Where is it getting routes from? How are they configured? Things like that. So IP Fabric, again, taking these snapshots of the environment, building it up, building an understanding of what the environment looks like, and then with that information, putting it into a system that's really easy to consume. Those snapshots can be scheduled. They can be run ad hoc. You can update individual devices. So if a change is made and you just need to refresh an individual device, we can do that. So in the environment, in the lab that I'm going to talk about here, go in and just show a quick diagram of what this looks like. So relatively simple environment. just a handful of routers. I have them divided up across 4 different sites. A lot of redundant links set up in here, a handful of devices that don't have some redundant connections, but really just kind of threw a bunch of stuff in here just to show off what IP Fabric does, what this is going to look like from a troubleshooting standpoint. So if we jump over and actually look at one of our devices here. So on this device, if I just do a ping, one of the things, so with this, we're going to go to a device that's on the other side of this network, and we can see that right now I have connectivity to it. So right now I can see end-to-end connectivity in the environment works. Now, for sake of the kind of this discussion, I'm going to introduce a problem, and then I will run a little script in the background that will hopefully break the network. And now my pings don't work. So now we can see that this doesn't work. Now the question is, well, why doesn't it work? I'm not going to, so this is where this gets fun. I know what the problem is because I made the problem, so I know what to look for. But if you just kind of think about this, it's surprisingly difficult to try and troubleshoot a problem when you know what you did, because I just know where to look. But kind of bear with me a little bit. So if we go through, and maybe the first thing that we're going to try and do is trace to that address. So where do I get? Actually, so we'll let that build out. But while this is going to run, actually I can hop into another device here. And let's do, if I can spell. Let's look at our routing table here. So the network that I'm looking for, I was trying to get to a 10.1.0.90. We can see that we're not getting a route to that network. So we don't know where that network is. Hopefully this is where, if you have good network documentation, that might be something that you could start with, is just where does that network exist? If we jump back to IP Fabric here, we can actually go in and look at a couple of different things. So one thing might be I could look at some of the different addresses that are in the environment. And I've got this 10.1.0.90 here as an address. So I can see what device this is on. I can also see the site that it's on. So I can see that this is in site 4. If I open up my saved view here, we can see that it's this bottom router here. So I can't get to this router. Theoretically, then I could kind of piece together where this is going to go. So I don't have a route to it. I don't know how to get there. Then it kind of becomes the process of, if we don't have a good diagram, if we don't know where this is, we don't have a route to it, what do I need to do? How do I get there? So if we jump back into our the devices here, let's go to that router, make sure that the router is up. So router's up, address is up. I could even go ping. So I can see that from that device, it's up. Now, I'm not going to go through and kind of step through all the different ways that we could kind of troubleshoot this. This could be a lot of things. It's difficult to know exactly where this is. You could go through and try a bunch of different ways. You could try doing something where maybe you try and ping a halfway point to see if you could get there, and then work your way back. Where is the break in the connection? So if I tried to do that, let's take let's go. So 65, that works. So if I jump back over to IP Fabric here, I could do something just to see. So this is Site 3, Router 5. So if I go back to my diagrams, so Site 3, Router 5, I can make it to this router. So now it's trying to work through. I can make it that far. The issue theoretically is somewhere beyond there. Trying to work through where that could be. And actually, so that's coming from. So that ping was from this router here. So from here, I can make it up to that site. So let's go to 65 was the one that I just did, and I can't get there. So now I know that the issue is somewhere between that end of site 3 and site 1. I'd have to kind of continue working my way through trying to narrow it down, or I could look at, if I had a list of where all of the networks are, try and figure out what other routes am I not learning based on the routes that I'm not learning. That might help me understand where this problem is. But again, there's a lot of information here. This is kind of dependent then on having that documentation of where the networks exist, what the topology looks like, how those connections exist. If I don't have that, then it's really trying to go through and map that stuff out manually. And especially if I don't have a known good config that I can go back and look at from when it worked. If I had the ability to, in this device, look at a routing table from prior to when this was bad, maybe I could look at how we learn the routes. That might tell me where my issue is. So we're going to jump back to IP Fabric here. And then in this, one of the things that to point out here, so we've got this R5, so Site 3 Router 5, that's one that we can't get to. All of these links are dual connected, but only a single change was made. Maybe a router's down. Maybe this could be a bunch of things. So now we're going to kind of look at some of the ways that IP Fabric could attempt to solve this. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because IP Fabric is based off of scheduled snapshots, this is a small lab. I can just create a new snapshot right away. This will collect the entire environment. This lab is only 24 routers. This snapshot takes less than a minute usually to complete. The other thing that could be done, instead of doing this full snapshot, would be to create just a snapshot, or to take the existing snapshot and refresh, say, a site. So if I knew that the issue, for example, was in site 3, I could just refresh all of those individual devices, or I could just take a new snapshot of just those devices. But since this environment is fairly small, we will just run this new snap. Looks like it should be just about done. So that's building. And now there's a lot of different ways that we could look at what this might look like. But one of the easy ones to start with would be if I just open up my topology diagram again. We can go through and we can do a compare snapshots. So this is the snapshot of what is running right now. If I compare that to an earlier snapshot, I can see that going from the current snapshot to earlier, the earlier one had added this link here. So I can see right now that the change in the topology, the thing that was different in the topology, was this link. To maybe make this, if I switch back to, just to show this in, so now I changed my base snapshot to the older one. The snapshot that I'm comparing to is the newer. So now we can see in the newer snapshot, the change that was made was that this link was removed. Now, That link being removed, that would break something, but we have a secondary link here. So now what we've got is there's two failures that apparently had happened, but only a single change was made. Why? Why are we not getting a connectivity, or why are we not getting connectivity across from this site 3 router 4 to router 5? So if we jump over to our terminal here, if we look at site 3 router 4, and then if I do, let's go show IPPF neighbors, we can see that we've got one of these links isn't coming up. So if I go to gig 3, so this should be our site R4 to R5, which is the route or the link that we were looking at. We can see that OSPF is set up here. We go over to our R5 site, or our site 3 router 5, and I go show. We can see that we've also got the link down on gig 2 there. Gig 2. And we can see that we've got OSPF configured here. Everything looks good. If you're kind of digging in and looking closely, the difference that we have is that there is an MTU that's set on 1. If I jump over to, where was my, so that's 5, there's our router 4. There's not an MTU set on this. So there's an MTU mismatch that's occurring between these two devices. Because of that MTU mismatch, the OSP neighborship isn't coming up. Now, again, I know where this was. I knew exactly where to look. So whether or not were this to occur in the wild, I probably wouldn't have made all of the same decisions of where to look, but you can see that there is some complication there to try and understand it. To show some of this off from the IP fabric standpoint, there's a couple of cool things that we can do here. So if I switch over to, actually, before we do that, let's go back. If I look at, so site for which one was it? Router 3. So the link between site 3 router 3 and site 3 router 5, those were the ones that was that link that was showing down. So here we can see that this interface was admin down. That's the change that I made that caused that link to go down. That interface going down, going into admin down. The issue then became that interface went admin down. OSPF now wasn't connecting on that connection, but because of the MTU mismatch on that secondary link, the secondary link never came up. So the OSPF misconfiguration wasn't necessarily easily visible, or not, I guess wasn't even an OSPF, it was an MTU misconfiguration. But because of that MTU mismatch, that secondary link wasn't coming up. The issue that occurred on the primary, that happened. The redundant link never actually came in and did what it should have and kept the connection up. And this is where these are the types of issues that I think are some of the ones that are the most difficult to find. If you go through, when I started this, I was able to do the end-to-end pings. Unless you're really digging in, looking for that MTU mismatch, or looking for something where like those two neighbors weren't coming up, that can be really, really difficult to find. So go back into IP Fabric here, and we're going to show off some of where this stuff would be visible. So the first thing to start with, this from the dashboard has a collection of intent checks. Now, when we say intent checks, an intent check is, you know, what the state of the environment is. So when IP Fabric is connecting to the devices, we're connecting state information from the devices. What's the both the configuration of the devices and then how are they actually functioning? So OSPF is an example in this scenario. OSPF is configured, that's one part, but is it actually up? Is the neighbor relationship establishing or not? If it is, great. If it's not, that tells me that I've got a problem. But that's one step beyond the config. So when IP Fabric is understanding these devices, when it's doing the data collection, it's getting both the configuration and then the running state of that. Then so that state, that's one part. Then we've got intent. Intent is basically what should it be. So in this OSPF example, the intent would be, well, if you have OSPF configured, it probably should be up. MTUs, if you have two interfaces that are connected to each other, the MTUs should match. Some of these are just out of the box intent checks that we have built in. You could build your own intent checks for pretty much anything that we can collect data on. You can build intent checks off of to say, maybe you want a specific MTU. You could create an intent check to look for an MTU of a certain value, or specific NTP servers, or routes that exist, HSRP configs, you name it. If we can collect data on it and get it into a table, we can build an intent check off of it. So then when these intent checks are done, this is where the kind of the assurance part of what IP Fabric does comes into play. If I know the state, I know the intent, if there's a difference, well, now we've got something to kind of raise a flag and say, hey, there's what's configured or what is and what should be are different. Assurance engine, that's going to tell us where these mismatches occur. So in our dashboard here, there's a couple of things right off the bat. So if I just go here under interfaces, there is this maximum transmission unit. So transit links with inconsistent MTUs detected. If I just click into this, this will tell me that we have an MTU mismatch on this link. So Site 3 Router 5 has a source of 1600 and the destination is 1500. The destination device, Site 3 Router 4, and then we've got the interfaces. So right here, I can see from the dashboard, there's an MTU mismatch. Quick, easy, done. I don't have to dig for it. I don't have to try and do pings with a do not fragment bit set, trying to figure out where it drops. I can tell exactly where that mismatch would be. I can then do things like I could click into the diagrams, see where they are. I could click into the router and get, say, information on each one of these interfaces. All that information is at my fingertips. So, at MTU mismatch, that was one of the issues. The other issue was then that we had the routing go down. So, under our OSPF, so here I've got the OSPF neighbor state, and we can see that we've got two neighbors that aren't in a good state. I can click in here and I can see that we've got the R4 to R5, where those are or R4 or Site 3 Router 4 connecting to Router 5, and then Site 3 Router 5 to Router 4. I can see that that's down. So that's going to show me, again, that OSPF connection is sitting in that EX state or EX start state because that MTU mismatch. So between the ability to look at the topology comparisons between the two snapshots, I could see that link was down. I can see that there's OSPF issues. I can see that there's MTU mismatches. I can see a whole bunch of information with relative ease here. And this is something from a dashboard standpoint, you look for the things that are yellow or red, you build the intent checks. These dashboards are customizable. Everything here is just kind of the out of the box stuff. So you could tune this to show specifically what you wanted to see in your environment. But really the big thing here is that in a scenario where kind of this example that I gave, if you're trying to find that MTU mismatch, that could require kind of a more senior network engineer to be able to log into a number of different devices, run a bunch of commands to try and piece together what happened, or rely on documentation that hopefully is accurate. Or you could use something like IP Fabric, where a person that just scroll through this list and look for things that are kind of obvious to resolve. One of the other things that we can do is even go back and I can look at previous snapshots. And in this previous snapshot, I can see that this MTU mismatch was there prior to when that interface went down. So you can go in, you can look at different times and see where these configs are. Where this becomes even more powerful is in a situation like this, that MTU mismatch might not have been visible until there was the link failure. Once that link failed because the secondary didn't come online, now we have an outage. With IP Fabric, we can see that there's that MTU mismatch before we have that link failure, before we can't get the routes, before we have the outage. We could come in, resolve that MTU mismatch, take that link offline, and that would resolve the issue. So getting that information, hugely beneficial from a troubleshooting standpoint. Being able to collect and analyze the data, or have a tool that does most of that work for you, brings it to you in a way that's easy to consume. You can bounce between the different snapshots, the different devices, the different views. You can use intent checks to really get an understanding of whether or not the environment is operating the way that it should be. And then with that, you can now take a lot of that work of troubleshooting those issues. You can push that to uh, say less senior engineers. You could have a junior network engineer that's just looking at the dashboard and looking for things that are kind of relatively obvious where there's a problem. If you take a junior engineer and they can just see right here that there is an MTU mismatch, you can identify that. You can get a ticket created to get that issue resolved, or at least bring attention to it with relative ease. Then the the big thing here is now potentially that entire outage could have been completely avoided because there were the dual links. If that MTU mismatch wasn't occurring, that second link would have been up. Issue the link that I shut down, would that have failed? That failure would have happened, but the redundancy would have kicked in. Everything would have been fine. So there's kind of two parts that I'm kind of showing here. One is the ability to find where that issue is, but the other is the ability to find issues before they are issues. Being able to resolve that MTU issue saves the outage. Now you still have a link fail, but you can resolve that link failure without the outage. And that, again, that's the strength of the platform. That's the strength of being able to get all of that data in. That said, that's kind of all I'm going to run through here. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that IP Fabric can do. There's a whole bunch of different stuff, from the ability to use APIs to collect information, the ability to do path traces across environments, inventory analysis. Like there's a lot of different stuff that IP Fabric can do, but really just wanted to focus on a kind of a troubleshooting scenario, show some of the different ways that we can get that information and really make that troubleshooting process a whole lot easier for you and your team. If you've got questions, you can check out our website, ipfabric.io. There's a guided demo that you can sign up for, where you can actually get into a demo environment and try things out for yourself, kind of get a feel for the environment. You can also request a demo so that one of the solution architects can work with you and just give you kind of a more customized demo, really dig into anything that you'd like to talk about. So hope this was informative.